nowhere near you.
You're choking me, you.
Can you please open your mouth for me so I can make sure you don't have to
Please open your mouth and shut the up. You get out of me, you mother baby. I will kill you.
It's a cloudy day in the Florida Keys where deputies catch up with one woman who may not exactly be in a sunshine state of mind.
Because you were about to take off on me and you are now lawfully detained. So please step out of the vehicle.
What's that? Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding you.
Ma'am, please step out. No. No? No.
So either, listen, step out of the car. I'm giving you a lawful order to step out of the car.
Then I want to record everything.
We're recording too.
I will record.
We're recording.
Then I will record everything.
Okay. That's fine, but you need to step out of the car.
Step out, please. You just let me record everything.
No.
A woman is seated in the back of a Monroe County Sheriff's patrol car. She is 60 years old. She is wearing sunglasses. She says she has just finished her third round of chemotherapy, and she is threatening to kill the person in front of her. The deputy does not flinch, because by the time those words left Deborah Odom's mouth, Monroe County law enforcement had already spent the better part of an afternoon trying everything else. They had asked politely. They had given lawful orders. They had called an ambulance twice when she said she couldn't breathe. They had talked her down in a parking lot, in a patrol car, in a jail booking room. They had watched her claim she didn't speak English. They had watched her accuse every person in the room of racism while directing slurs at the same people she was accusing. And through every single second of it, the cameras were rolling. Here is what you need to understand before we go any further. Deborah Odom was the one who demanded it all be recorded. She pointed at the cameras. She announced to her followers. She performed scene by scene for a lens she believed was her ally. The Florida Keys move at their own speed. There's something almost meditative about the overseas highway, a single ribbon of road stitched across more than 100 miles of islands, with the Atlantic on one side and the Gulf on the other, and nothing between you and the water if you lose control of your vehicle. Locals know every curve of it. They know which stretches have no shoulder, no median, no margin for error. They also know what a car in trouble looks like. On this particular afternoon in 2024, the Monroe County 911 Center began receiving calls. Not a single call, multiple calls. Separate motorists reporting the same vehicle, a red car drifting out of its lane, swerving, making erratic, unpredictable movements as it traveled south from around the 100-mile marker. These weren't neighbors with a grudge. These were strangers, people who had nearly shared a catastrophic piece of highway with someone who had no business being on it. Monroe County Sheriff's Office deputies were already responding. Before we go any further, if you're someone who needs to understand why people do the things they do, you're exactly where you should be. This is the Malice Mind. Subscribe if you haven't already. Now, back to the deputies working that afternoon on the overseas highway. The officers who made initial contact with Deborah Odom were doing exactly what their training required, responding to a public safety call with patience, precision, and, as would become increasingly clear, a level of professionalism that most people would have long abandoned. The first moments of the stop were almost routine. A deputy explained the situation, the 911 calls, the multiple witnesses, the concerning behavior observed while following the vehicle into the lot. They asked if she was okay. They noted the way she swayed while standing. They detected alcohol. In any DUI investigation, those observations mark the beginning of a defined, lawful process, one built to protect both the public and the person being assessed. Deborah Odom was about to make that process completely unrecognizable.
I have breast cancer. I just had my third treatment of breast cancer. And these people have stopped me.
Okay, so,
You think that's cool?
well, based on the fact that several people called in that they were concerned about your driving and how you almost hit them.
I understand.
Okay, so my next question to you is, based on the fact that, given that I could smell alcohol in your breath, okay, you're swaying while you stand, I'm going to ask if you want to consent to some field sobriety exercises.
Of course I would. But,
Okay.
But, I just lost.
You just lost what?
It just is something with my.
Here is the moment everything changed. With sufficient grounds established to conduct a DUI investigation, deputies issued a lawful order: step out of the vehicle. She refused. Not with hesitation, not with a question, with refusal, the particular, practiced refusal of someone who has decided at a fundamental level that what applies to everyone else does not apply to her. She reached for her phone instead. There is something immediately revealing in that reflex, the instinct to perform before a camera rather than comply with the authority standing directly outside her door. She announced to whoever might be watching that she had breast cancer, that she had just completed her third round of treatment, that this, all of this, was being done to her. Deputies were not unmoved by the disclosure of a serious illness, but a medical history does not dissolve a lawful detention, not when multiple motorists have already called in describing a vehicle that nearly hit them. Not when alcohol is detectable. Not when the vehicle itself had made a dangerously wide turn pulling into the lot. There were still 911 logs. There was still observable impairment. There was still the matter of a car that had been weaving down one of Florida's most unforgiving roads for miles. When Odom finally exited the vehicle, not voluntarily, but because the consequences of remaining had become unavoidable, the nature of the stop shifted. She reached for the license a deputy had taken from her. I tried to take it back. That single impulsive decision to grab documentation from a law enforcement officer mid-investigation transformed a DUI stop into an arrest. And what came next made the parking lot look like the easy part.
She don't want to be like she got back.
I know you did not.
Listen, all right, we're done
You got
here.
my license?
Yes.
Oh, here we go.
The suspect's attempt to snatch her license back from deputies earns her a fast pass into handcuffs. Let's see how that goes for her.
Nope, not because this is not going to end well for you.
What unfolded over the next several hours was captured in full by body cameras worn by multiple deputies across multiple locations. That documentation matters because what Deborah Odom alleged was happening and what the footage shows was actually happening were two different realities occupying the same afternoon. She said she couldn't breathe. Deputies called an ambulance. Medics arrived. They assessed her. Within minutes of claiming she was in a respiratory crisis, she was speaking clearly, loudly, and at length to the next person who approached her, with no apparent indication of the emergency she had described moments earlier. She said she was being choked. Body cam footage from multiple angles showed deputies maintaining physical control consistent with standard restraint protocol, no contact with her throat or airway. The footage did not corroborate what she was saying. The footage she had demanded deputies also record did not corroborate what she was saying. She said over and over, in an escalating loop, that she was being hurt. The phrase didn't vary. It wasn't localized. It wasn't tied to any specific action being taken at any specific moment. It was, from a behavioral standpoint, a broadcast, not a response to pain, but a script. Deputies worked through it methodically. They called for backup. They spoke to her calmly while waiting on the pavement. They repositioned her as protocol requires when someone claims breathing difficulty. They treated her medical disclosures as credible, calling emergency services more than once in direct response to what she reported. And then they searched her vehicle. What investigators found inside Deborah Odom's car was the quietest evidence of the afternoon. 4 bottles of wine in various states of consumption, one completely empty, one partially consumed and open, one sealed, and one also empty. All of them are cold. 4 bottles, cold, in a vehicle that had been traveling for miles down a road with water on both sides and dozens of other drivers in its path. The picture that was already developing became something else entirely. Getting Odom from that parking lot to the station was its own sustained ordeal. Her behavior moved in a pattern that was neither random nor consistent with simple fear. Moments of apparent cooperation, followed by explosive resistance, followed by brief calm, followed by a new escalation. When flexibility was shown, she pushed further. When a boundary held, she pressed harder against it. What it resembled, behaviorally, was not disorientation, it was testing. Alone in the back of the patrol car with the camera still recording, she directed her account not at the deputy up front, but at whatever audience she imagined was watching. She described actions the camera was simultaneously documenting as not occurring. She narrated her victimhood in real time, for a real-time record that contradicted her in real time. At the jail, the situation continued to deteriorate. She resisted the routine removal of her jewelry during booking standard protocol, non-negotiable, applied to every person processed in that facility. She threatened. She screamed. She used racial slurs against the very officers she accused of racial animus. She threatened to kill at least one deputy. She suddenly claimed she couldn't speak English, then delivered a coherent, fluent statement in English about her right to an interpreter. Deputies placed her in a restraint chair designed for exactly this scenario. A spit mask was applied when her behavior created a biological risk to staff. Every second of it, on camera, the camera she had asked them to run. In a case where everything happens on a body camera, the breakthrough isn't a single revelation. It's the accumulation of what cannot be walked back. Deborah Odom had pointed at cameras. She had announced her performance to followers. She had shaped her narrative in real time for a real-time audience. What she didn't account for was this: the camera doesn't choose sides. The 911 call logs documented a trail of motorist complaints stretching back for miles. The body cam footage, worn by multiple deputies across the duration of the encounter, produced a consistent, multi-angle record of every interaction. The vehicle search had yielded 4 bottles of wine, all cold, in a car that had been on the road. Battery on a law enforcement officer because at several documented points during the encounter, Odom made voluntary, aggressive physical contact with deputies, including, according to the footage, what appeared to be a biting attempt. All of it is documented. None of it is ambiguous. Deborah Odom was a defendant. The performance was over. The footage, every minute of it, was now evidence. At some point, late in the afternoon, the booking process concluded. The charges were filed. The cameras, finally, were turned off. Let's talk about what we actually watched. Because this case, stripped of its spectacle, offers something genuinely instructive: behavioral patterns under sufficient pressure, reveal themselves. And what Deborah Odom's behavior reveals over the course of that afternoon is worth examining carefully and honestly. The behavior documented in this encounter is consistent with what forensic behavioral researchers describe as narcissistic traits under acute stress. The particular way a person with a deeply ingrained sense of special status responds when that status is not recognized by the situation in front of them. Start with the entitlement architecture. From the first moments of the stop, Odom operated from a foundational belief that the rules governing this situation were for other people. She invoked a serious illness, not as context, but as exemption. She named a personal relationship with the county sheriff not for assistance, but as evidence of a status that should have made this stop unnecessary. She reached for her phone to broadcast the scene before deputies had completed a single procedural step. Forensic psychologists have documented this pattern across a range of high narcissist individuals encountering institutional authority. The almost reflexive assertion that proximity to power, social standing, or personal circumstance constitutes a kind of immunity. The implicit logic is, I am not the person this process is designed for. Therefore, applying it to me is a mistake, or worse, an injustice. Now consider the deployment of victimhood as a tactical resource. There is a distinction, a meaningful one, between genuine distress and performed distress, and it becomes clearest when the claimed distress disappears, the moment it stops producing results. Odom claimed she couldn't breathe. Medics were called. Within minutes of the emergency claim, she was speaking at length and volume with no apparent respiratory difficulty. She claimed she was being choked on camera, while the same camera showed no contact in the region she described. This pattern, what behavioral researchers sometimes describe as instrumental emotion, or the strategic performance of distress to produce a desired outcome, has a defining characteristic. When the performance fails to achieve its goal, it escalates or pivots. It doesn't resolve, because the underlying state it was designed to convey isn't real. The impulsivity that produced the license grab, the biting behavior, the threats, these indicate that the control she attempted to maintain over her performance was thin. Under sustained pressure, it fractured. And the consistent gap between what was happening and what she claimed was happening is consistent with what psychologists term cognitive distortion under narcissistic injury. The mind's refusal to incorporate information that conflicts with its self-conception. Not lying. Exactly. Something more structurally entrenched than that. She had asked for everything to be recorded. Everything was. Deborah Odom entered a no-contest plea to the charges against her. She was sentenced to probation. Her driver's license was suspended. Fines were levied. No prison time. The legal resolution will read, to some as proportionate, to others as something else. That is a conversation worth having in the comments. The deputies who worked that day answered a public safety call, followed their training under conditions designed to exhaust that training, and endured hours of false accusations, racial hostility, physical assault, and sustained threats. Then they went back to work. That's worth saying plainly, because in coverage of incidents like this one, the people doing the job tend to disappear behind the person generating the spectacle. They don't disappear here. They did their jobs. They had a right to that afternoon. Here is what I keep returning to when I study a case like this one. At what point does the belief that consequence doesn't apply to you, acted on so consistently, at such cost to everyone around you, stop being an attitude and start being who you are? Deborah Odom asked for it all to be recorded. Now the whole world has seen it. Cases like this one remind us that accountability doesn't wait for permission, and neither does a camera. If that thought stays with you, it should. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if the Malice Mind is where you come to understand the parts of human behavior most people would rather look away from, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe. We're just getting started.